mentioned inauguration and so on.
Yes.
And so when it occurred at the time, it was like, boy, that was pretty good timing, actually.
Yes.
But it was unburdening. And indeed, as I say, the shame items have started to show up. The website of this particular pastor before and after his appointment has distinctive changes with, I think, we found 1,300 contexts that had been removed. So 1,300 noun-verb groups.
Very interesting. All right, we're at the bottom of the hour. We're going to take our last break of the night, and when we come back, we'll reopen the phone lines for you to call in and ask questions here before 09 gets nice and settled in on the East Coast. Here's a question that came in from a listener. It says, hey, Jack, do you think Clif could possibly throw in his 2 cents on President-elect Obama's mention of a domestic militia that would be more well-funded than the military, or just as well-funded as the military, excuse me? We have seen some blending of military personnel with police personnel. We have seen that. As a matter of fact, there was this report that came out of, I believe it was California, I'm not exactly, somewhere in California, I think Orange County, about them observing at a DUI checkpoint or something like that. Raised a lot of controversy. We'll see what Clif has to say. Do you have any input on that, Clif?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of the linguistics that seem to suggest that the controllers that are Obama's, that pull his strings, and everybody else that's a politician, wants to rely on more fascistic attempts to control the populace. They have a number of issues as we go through a very radical change for our species on our planet. If we take a large view, we can see why they want to do these things, which is that if we think of the Earth, and because we have no other planet to mess with at the moment, as a petri dish, then we're a colony of bacteria that has reached the edge of the petri dish. That is to say, we've killed off the middle and have gradually moved out towards the edge of the petri dish, eating all of the nutrients there, and we've run up against that glass wall.
Yeah.
And so we're at a point now, resource-wise, where the human species consumes about 40% of the planetary biota annually. But Mr. Fuller and others had postulated that if we'd crossed the barrier where we were consuming 46% of the biota, we were on the death spiral at that point towards extinction, because the biota could not replenish from year to year, and therefore humans would begin to die off, and this was the ultimate penalty to be paid for in the form of overpopulation. But the powers that be need a certain level of population to maintain their luxuriant lifestyles. And without that, they suffer, and they don't want to suffer. So they need to have a population, but they need to control it to exist on fewer and fewer resources as they take more and more control. Less than 1% of the populace of the planet controls 90% of its resources. 2.5 billion people live on less than $2 a day. They're about to be joined by another 2 billion people as the dollar collapses, who will be forced to exist in a way that they've never encountered before, without the dollar as their support and the easy flow of goods back and forth, the shipment of food, etc. So this is going to put a huge stress on what is known as the social contract, which is between you and your government. It says if you behave yourself and don't do things like riot and take certain extreme actions in their view, they will provide for you. But real soon they won't be able to provide for you, and therefore the conundrum exists. And one of their control mechanisms is through the elimination in our country of Posse Comitatus Act, and therefore allowing the military to train and direct local law enforcement, as well as the idea of forming, in essence, a brown shirt movement, a paramilitary movement, where it would have all of the disciplinary and hierarchical structure of the military, which means they're on top and you're on the bottom, and you take their orders. But it wouldn't be armed and as well as the military, and its goal would be different, which would be to inculcate a mindset of control in a large group of people that could then be used to control the others that you couldn't control mentally. The problem both with the military and the lack of posse comitatus is that you now find that instantly every person in the country that is not a member of the elite is part of, that has more in common with the lower members of society than anyone else. In other words, you can be a high-placed corporate person, but if you're not a member of the elite ruling class and controlling vast amounts of money, you can run afoul of the legal system, and instantly, because the legal or the law enforcement, which used to be peace officers who used to try and just keep the peace, now are there to enforce laws, and they've been trained by the military to see the citizenry as the enemy, because bear in mind the military only has one function, to defeat the enemy. They only deal in things in those kind of terms. They've passed that terminology on to law enforcement. So law enforcement is no longer dealing with citizens, they're dealing with the enemy. And thus you see all this extreme behavior when as soon as they get you, they try and beat you into submission. Because you're not a citizen in their view, you're an enemy at that point because you've come afoul of their particular behavioral ethos, which we call laws or ordinances or so on, right? And so that's our real problem. They will attempt to do so. They must, in terms of the power that be, have I think there's something pressuring them. Either the idea that we've run out of resources and they must do this control, or something even larger than that, looming on the near horizon, like maybe 2012, that frightens them, and they're really afraid of things getting out of hand before then, so that they're not in control at this particular time. There seems to be a lot of evidence in the language that that is the case. So it wouldn't surprise me that they would attempt to implement any number of civilian control population or civilian population control mechanisms under the guise of various different kinds of new organizations, which will all basically come down to some sort of military-style hierarchy with graduated levels of control.
Yes. You know, we've seen I've seen videos come through to in my email from people that, like dash cams from police officers. One in particular that stands up in my mind was a woman that was driving along. She got stopped at one of these checkpoints where they make sure everyone has their insurance. And she wouldn't give him any information. She wouldn't give him her ID. She did nothing wrong. And because she was resisting, and he said that he can't let her go until she provides her papers, they arrested her. And then they were going through her car, and she had all this information about the Constitution and so on and so forth. And
that made her a radical. Yeah.
Yes, it made her a radical, and they were like, man, she's into some weird stuff here, and so on and so forth. She was later cleared. I mean, she didn't do anything wrong. She shouldn't have even been arrested. But that is really, they have a law for everything. They can arrest you for anything they want to arrest you for.
And they can arrest you simply because they want to, and then apply some reason afterwards.
Yes.
And that's the shift over from a soft form of fascism that we saw under the Bushistas here, where they said, yes, you have the right to free speech, but only in that little tiny area of the city over there where no one really cares. And you're miles away from whatever event you want to protest. And so that's been removed. You do not have the right of free speech. And freedom of the press is a myth. It is only true of those 5 people that own all the corporations and own all the presses. This has got them rather annoyed, though, because the Internet is forming a real problem for them and awakening a large number of people in the form of all forms of media across the Internet, including the radio, and that actually is going to be their next censorship scrubbing thing, will be Internet radio.
Oh, yeah.
They're applying it now with the Australian gateway approach, the Internet approach, to try and isolate the whole continent of Australia and control all of their media sources through this soft censorship, which would apply to news articles and everything else. But now I'm hearing from people in positions of to know that indeed the government is attempting to do radio-style real-time, real-world substitutions on language, which I think would be rather bizarre, but that's neither here nor there. There are people seeking patents on the thing. And also, by the way, getting back into our global coastal event, I was recently given a copy of a draft 768-page document that the federal government is preparing, which apparently is on a website and you can go and download, but because of my particular circumstances, I'm not able to do that with impunity. Rather, I would not want to leave a particular trail. So it's out there, but it's well hidden, and it details what's going on in the United States of America to deal with the imminent threat of rising sea levels. And they're talking about what state is doing what and so on. And so far, the most prepared state is Maryland, because they're doing their actual surveys and getting ready for things. And it discusses the sudden rapid change required in property laws when this occurs, because in some states on the East Coast, for instance, public land only extends up to the height, to the lowest high tide mark, that kind of thing, these sort of strange rules. And there's no such thing as public access granted on beaches and so on the way there is on the West Coast. And so they're talking about having to, in a fell swoop, so to speak, when presented with the actual rise of the water, to have to redo the entire ownership of property rules within the United States. And they're preparing for that right now. So do not be surprised if sometime in 2009, probably in the fall, we're presented with another situation like the Patriot Act, where all of a sudden a document of several thousand pages appears and is passed into law in less than a week, and no one reads it. And this one will be all about who owns what and how the government basically owns everything.
Eminent domain, in a sense, right?
No, even much beyond that.
Really?
Out and out dictatorship in the form of them saying it is for the public good that your seacoast, or that your property you have right now, which is a 16 feet, just to pick a number up above the high tide mark, is suddenly waterfront, and